Anyway, I am Kathy Biggs, and I am not a native plant expert, but I'm somebody who loves using native plants. And before I go any further, I want to introduce the quiet partner. So Dave, if you'd stand up. Yay. Dave, love of my life, right-hand man. Yeah, all of that. So what I'm going to do is talk to you about a unique idea. Ponds are very, very popular, but most people put in a pond, and they are putting it in for koi and beautiful tropical lilies, and that's all nice. But when you put in a pond and you use native plants, and you put it in for wildlife, instead of your enjoyment, for the enjoyment of the wildlife, and of course you will enjoy the wildlife coming, it becomes so much more, and I'm hoping to turn you all on to this idea. So I'm going to talk about the critters, the animals you might expect that would come into a wildlife pond. I'm going to talk to you about some of the native plants you could use, and I hope all of you got the handout that says California native plants for ponds. If you didn't, they're on the back table. And we also brought along some copies of Dragonflies of the Bay Area. It's 2 years old, but they haven't changed much in the last 2 years. So it's still good. It's still good. So build a pond for wildlife. What wildlife might visit your pond? Let's see if I can do it this way. Yeah. Well, for sure you're going to get a black phoebe. Yeah, black phoebes are specialists on ponds. They skim. Oh, they're handing those out. They skim the insects off the top of the pond, like water skeeters and things that drowned in your pond. That's how they get their food. So for sure you're going to have a black phoebe at your pond. And I was lucky enough to have this critter, the gray fox, come in. And it was a she. And she brought 3 kits with her. And it was just sweet. I never saw her get a drink from the pond. She came during the night, but she left her scat there. And that was how I knew that she'd been to the pond itself. And we did get a few pictures. Then, if you live in the foothills, deer will come into your pond now. We have 2 homes and 2 ponds. And our home in Sebastopol, I rarely get a deer. But in my home up on the sides of Mount Shasta, I am right in the middle of the deer's territory, and they come in. These are 2 young bucks. Their antlers are just starting to grow, and they're in velvet, and we love them. Some people discourage deer. That's up to you whether you want to discourage them. I encourage them. And you'll even have unsuspected visitors. I did not take this picture, nor did Dave. This is actually a European photo I got permission to use, but bats will come in. If you have mosquitoes flying above your pond in the evenings, they'll feed on those, but they'll also come in like this one and get a drink. And I have not actually seen a bat do this, but I have seen a nighthawk, which is a kind of bird that is like a bat in that it catches insects high up in the air, and I've had it come in the daytime and scoop water in its beak, just like this bat is doing. Really, really cool. Well, not all animals are exotics. So this is the neighbor's cat, Callie. She loves our pond. She thinks the pond water is way better than any other water we could put in a bowl for her. But mostly you're going to have smaller things at your pond. Things like robins. They're going to be very common. So both towies. Here's the California towie and the spotted towie. And a zippeter hawk. I believe that one was a Cooper's hawk. And a thrush. It's either the Swainsons or I think it's the Swainsons. Anyway, I'm nervous when I get up in front of a group, so I'm not remembering which hawk for sure and which bird for sure, but I'll get it together. And sometimes the birds come in a large group. So these are the cedar waxwings. Just love it when they come in. They're just such sleek and pretty birds. Some other birds that have come in, it's a female Anna's hummingbird, a Townsend's warbler, and I think it's a female flicker, northern flicker. Those birds are all on the top of my waterfall. So birds come to your pond for 2 reasons, either to take a bath or to get a drink, or maybe a bit of both. And I have a pair of mallards that stop by every spring, and it's just a delight for Dave and I if we get to see them. And we had herons that came in back when we had some goldfish in the pond. And if you have koi in your pond, they will really enjoy them. But you won't get to enjoy them anymore because they'll be a meal. So 57 species of birds I've recorded at my pond, and that didn't count the pair of white pelicans that flew over and looked down. I thought about counting them, but I thought that would maybe be cheating. Other critters that will enjoy a wildlife pond are the butterflies. This is a Lorquin's admiral coming to puddle at the pond. So butterflies, especially the males, need to get certain minerals. And they will come to your pond edge where the water has evaporated and the minerals are accumulated there. And they'll get their minerals there. And I have more species of butterflies at my pond than when I was growing flowers to attract them. So the water is really an important factor. And Art Shapiro, I don't know if you know him, he has a butterfly guide, he's a butterfly expert, has told me that butterflies naturally go to plants growing in wetlands, and that plants growing in wetlands have more nutrition. So a pond really is an attractive situation for many kinds of butterflies. Here's a California sister, a tortoiseshell, some kind of skipper, I don't identify skippers, and I believe a Mulatus crescent. And this is a composite photo, it's the same butterfly. This is the red admiral. I've had 23 different kinds of butterflies come in that I've been able to document visiting the pond. But there are other critters that will visit your pond that need your pond for their existence. And that includes the dragonflies. And I have to say, I did not get into dragonflies first and then build a pond for them. I built a pond, and the dragonflies came. And there were no books about them, and that's how I became the author of California's first dragonfly guide. So you never know where building a pond may take you. But dragonflies lay their eggs in the water. And a dragonfly, we only think of them as a flying insect. They only fly for a couple of weeks of their life. They live underwater in your pond for about a year, maybe even 3 years before they emerge to be flying insects. So they need ponds. Without a pond, they can't procreate. So this is the female, very dull colored, and this is the male. Dave took this gorgeous picture of a male 8-spotted skimmer at our pond. In fact, it'll be mostly males you're going to see at your pond because they're going to claim territories and hold those territories, waiting for a female to come in. And, well, it's very interesting. Their whole sex life is quite interesting. I would love to come back again next year and teach you guys about dragonflies. But they're ancient creatures. They were here before the dinosaurs. And yet they have some physiology that's so advanced that we can't duplicate it. Red, deflamed skimmer, Libellula saturata, saturated with color. This was on the cover of my first book. I know there was a copy of my first book on the table as I came in. It was kind of fun to see that. Cardinal meadowhawks really like cool coastal areas, so I have this species a lot at our pond. This is a female. This is a western pondhawk. Isn't she pretty? She's the only all-green one. And then there's the darners, and instead of just tapping their eggs in water, they actually make slits in plant stems and lay their eggs there. So you'll attract all of these to your pond. And the only way you'll really know if the dragonflies are successful in breeding in your pond is if you see this, the exuvia they leave behind. So when they're crawling around underneath the water, they're inside this exoskeleton, and when they decide to emerge, they climb up a stem. They puff themselves open with air, and you can see the area where it's opened up, and they crawl out, and that process takes about an hour. So dragonflies will try to lay eggs on car hoods. That's why the paint is made to withstand the gel around their eggs. They'll lay their eggs in spilled oil, anything reflective. They'll try to lay eggs in a koi pond, but your koi will enjoy the dragonfly nymph and the eggs as their food. So unless you see an exuvia on your pond, they have not successfully bred. And then there's the little damselflies. And this is damselfly courtship. Whenever you see dragonflies in tandem, That is courtship. You have to see them in the wheel position, which I won't go into here, for them to be mating. And there are 27 different ones that have visited my pond, including the blue and black Pacific forktail and that little red desert firetail. You'd think he'd really show up, but he's so tiny. And he gets on a blade of grass and he just disappears. So dragonflies need ponds. Other insects that would visit your pond are these giant water beetles, who are polywog specialists, I found out the hard way. And then there's a water strider, and that's an odd-looking photo because he's on ice. This was taken on my pond at McLeod, and we're at about 4,700 feet there. And I was so surprised. There was only an inch of thawed pond, and the water strider was out and walking around. And then the other picture is a damselfly that's just emerged. Okay, another critter that really needs our ponds are the frogs. Frogs are in trouble worldwide. And our native, yes?
Louder.
Louder?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm afraid with this microphone. Okay, I will speak louder. Our native tree frogs, which are about the size of a quarter, but you can hear them from a quarter mile away. Anyway, our Pacific tree frogs, which are the only native frogs to this area, unless you get up into the foothills where they have the yellow-legged and the red-legged frogs, they evolved in ephemeral ponds, which means those are ponds that dry up, that don't have fish in them. So if you have fish in a pond, our frogs cannot successfully breed there. They'll lay eggs, they'll call, but the polywogs will be eaten, and it's a problem. So I try to encourage people to build ponds and to not put any fish in their ponds. So this picture has 12 tree froglets in it. So I zoomed in and I circled them so you can see a few of them. This is at our Mount Shasta pond. And they're just really a delight. You've probably gone to a native pond out in the foothills, that one of these ephemeral ponds, and you have to be careful where you step because there'll be so many little froglets all around the border. It's really fun to recreate that in your own yard. I feel like Ma Nature sometimes.
Do you have to send for big tadpoles, or?
When I first put my pond in, I went to a nearby place and collected some tadpoles and took them in, but I don't think I needed to. I think the frogs would have found me on their own. But if you live far away from any other water, that's something you could consider. So this is showing all the critters that enjoy my pond, and you might notice the last one that came in is a human. I enjoy my pond very, very much. And on hot days, I enter my pond. I know how to keep cool. My neighbors are all going, oh God, it's over 90 today. And I'm saying, oh, I'm sitting in my pond drinking an iced latte, and it's a great day. Fun. So I'm going to go through the steps that you would need to create a wildlife pond. I'm going to try to motivate you to want to do this. So the first step is your mindset. And this may seem like, oh, that's not very important. I have helped many people build wildlife ponds, and I can't tell you how many of them got diverted when they got to the nursery by the koi. They put the koi in the pond, and then when the great heron came in, they went out and chased it away. So you really have to tell yourself, I am going to build this pond, and it's going to be for the wildlife. And another thing you're going to find is you're going to not be the owner of that pond. The wildlife is going to be the owner of that pond. You are going to be the caretaker. You give up ownership of a wildlife pond. It's just an amazing phenomenon. So here's one of the little tree frogs. He's sleeping right in the middle of that leaf of my Indian rhubarb. And that plant is on the plant list, and I cannot tell you its scientific name, but if you need it, it's there on the list. Of course, sometimes you have to change your mindset about what critters you're going to invite into your yard. Some people consider this little Douglas squirrel to be a rat with a furry tail. But I love him, and I really get a kick out of seeing him come into my pond. And of course, the other critter people worry about is this one, raccoons. But think about it. Raccoons are native here. All of our wetlands evolved with raccoons. If you want to be the pond owner and get upset because the plant gets tipped over in your pond, you can, but that's not going to kill your plant. It's going to turn and go right straight up to the water. So I tell people the best way to control raccoons is to change your mindset. Think of them as Mother Nature's rearrangers and welcome them into your yard and build a pond big enough that they can't trash it. So here's a picture of my pond 2 years ago, and I don't see my laser pointer. Dave, do you know where it is? Oh, it got put away. Well, okay. In the area right to the left of the pink azalea flowers, I had some pond liner showing, and I didn't want it to show, so I used spray foam insulation and threw moss on it while it was still damp, and it had this beautiful mossy bed there. But the moss kept disappearing, and I thought, those rascally raccoons. Well, guess what? That is not what was doing it. Look at this area, and now this next slide shows you who the culprit was. It was a mother robin. She was collecting the moss for building her nest. And here I've been blaming the raccoon, so you never know what you're going to be providing for. So that was just really a warm situation for me. It made me feel really good. Okay, so hopefully you've thought about building a pond for wildlife and what would be involved. Next, you need to research, and as CNPS members, you're already doing a lot of that. You need to find out what's native in your area and think about what you like. So the plant I'm showing right now is the arrowhead sagittaria, which is native here. And now I've got a pointer, it looks like. It's the top one. Good, Sagittaria, thank you. This is blue flag iris, and I forget, is it iris is the genus name? Anyway, it's Missouri something. But I looked it up on the website, and it says it's a California native. So I don't know if that's true or not, but I welcome anything that's native to the North America in my pond because it has a web presence that's national. And then think about what you like. What I love is wetland meadows. I would love to recreate this picture that was taken up in Oregon. And you don't have to be a purist if you build a pond for wildlife. The azalea you saw before and you're seeing here is not our native western azalea. It's one I was given at the birth of my first child, and I'm not throwing it away. So you don't have to be a purist, but I am, at least azalea is a native genus to this area. And then I want to introduce you to some of the gorgeous plants that are native to this area. And this is water clover. Now I don't know if this is the native California water clover, but there is one. And with 4 leaves, it just makes you feel lucky to have it. And whenever the pond has been photographed several times and featured in magazines, and this is the plant they always want to photograph. And then mare's tail. I heard somebody reading that name a while ago. It's a plant. These are plants that are rooted in the bottom of the pond and then emerge and stick up from the water. And this is the favorite plant for all of my dragonflies to do their metamorphosis on. This is their favorite plant to climb up on and break open their exoskeleton and emerge. And so is this one, water plantain. I took this picture just 2 days ago in my pond. And there's a kind of damselfly, and it's called a spreadwing. And this plant, the stems that the flower's going up on, they choose it every single time to put their eggs in. So I don't know if there's a non-native plant they would use instead, but this is the plant they use in my pond. Here's the blue flag iris again. It's a beautiful plant. And water shield, this plant, the stem comes up right in the very center underneath. So it's different than a water lily. And water pennywort, I had to laugh. In Texas, they called it water dollar wort. Everything's bigger in Texas. And underneath it, the green is the little duckweed. And the pinkish color is a fairy fern, Azolla. And some people have told me they have problems with this with their pond. I haven't. In fact, one time I purposely encouraged it to cover my whole pond, and then I just netted it off afterwards and provided no problem. So I'm not afraid of having it in my pond. In fact, later on, you'll see something eating it later on. This is my new experiment. This is colt's foot. And I bought this at a native nursery, and it grows in our creeks and puts up this pretty flower head, so I'm hoping that'll work. So I'm moving now from plants that grow in the pond from the bottom and come upwards to plants that I use around the edges of my pond. So this is a cultivar of the cardinal plant. loves to have its feet damp. Of course, there's sea monkey flower. And knotweed and scarlet monkey flower. The scarlet monkey flower is this plant, and this is the knotweed. They're not blooming yet, so I couldn't show them to you. They're both new plants for me. And our wild ginger loves it in damp places. And for drama, you can't beat this one. This is Indian rhubarb, and it grows in the creeks around here. And I got this one from the Mount McLeod River. And a little tuber had broken off and was laying on the sandbar. And I took this little tuber home and I planted it. And I got 1 leaf that year. And the next year I had 2 leaves, and my pond is now 18 years old. And 18 of these huge leaves, they're about this big around, is really dramatic. In fact, I have to kind of thin them as I go. And this is different than Gunnera, which has the sharp barbs on it. This is a tender plant. It won't hurt anybody. Okay, so I've talked to you about having a mindset, and I've talked to you about the kind of plants you could use. The next thought you'd have is, well, where am I going to put this pond, and how big am I going to make it? So maybe close your eyes and think of your ideal pond and your ideal place. And now open your eyes and double it. The mistake most people make is putting in a pond that's too small. People think, oh, I'm going to start with a little pond. That'll be easier. Well, if you have a small pond, there's more variation in water temperature. The rascally raccoons can get to every single bit of it in one night. Many other reasons why you're better off building a larger pond. Now, the British Dragonfly Society did a study, and this is for dragonflies, but I think it holds true in general. Make your pond 15 by 20 feet. That is the ideal size. With a net, you can reach to the middle of it to get debris. My pond's a little bigger than that. My pond started off as a 24-foot round doughboy swimming pool. So my pond is 20 by 24. I can't quite reach the very middle of it with the net. So I think the Dragonfly Society was correct. And then have a deep area that's about 3 feet deep at some point in your pond, because herons, raccoons, and things won't go into water that deep. And if you have things you want saved, they'll be safe that way. Now, if you go to a pond nursery, they will tell you, put your pond in a sunny place. I didn't have a sunny place. I had a swimming pool that was under a beautiful black oak tree, which has since died. Sorry about that. I got its feet too wet, too much splashing. Learned the hard way. But my pond was great in the shade. They tell you that because they're wanting you to buy tropical lilies. And tropical lilies need sunshine. So if you only have a shady place, that's okay. You can put a pond in a shady place. Let's see. Put the pond where you can see it. My pond's right outside my kitchen window. I had a girlfriend said, well, for wildlife, don't you want your pond out, in the South 40, as my farmer dad used to say. And so she put her pond way back where she couldn't see it in her yard as a meditation place. Except she forgot to meditate for about 3 days. And she went back there, and those rascally raccoons had moved her waterfall flow to go outside the pond. She lost everything in her pond. So if the pond is close into your home where you can see it, not only will you get more pleasure, your pond will get better care. So don't be afraid to put it right by your house. We've learned we don't go near our window without peeking through the side first to see who might be out there. Maybe it'd be this red-shouldered hawk. So this is using a zoom lens on our camera. Almost all the bird pictures you saw were taken through my window. I use it as my bird blind. You want to vary the edge treatments when you put in a pond to make it look like it belongs in your yard. There's nothing more artificial than a lawn with a pond with a circle of rocks around it. And that's also not good for critters. They're going to be exposed as they go in and out of your pond. So the most important part of a wildlife pond is having a beach. That's one thing that would be different from a koi pond. This is an area where you have access and where animals have access. And then with my paths, I use 2 visual tricks. Let's see. My path starts out wide and gets very narrow at the end. My son said, this is an art trick he learned, and it makes things look bigger, so my pond seems bigger than it is. So it's not necessary for a wildlife pond, but it will make you feel like you have more of a pond. Yeah. And maybe you'll want to put in some, oh yes, a piece of driftwood or a log that breaks the surface of your pond. This ties it to your land. And Dave and I didn't realize how true this was until we had helped one woman build a pond. And she had us over to see it. And she says, Kathy, the pond's nice, but it just doesn't look like it belongs here. And behind it, she had about a 12-foot long dead tree branch. And we just took that branch and put it so the end of it was in her pond. And it totally changed it and tied it to her land. So have something that goes in and out of your pond. This also could serve as an escape route if you have a deep pond. And there's a berm I'm pointing out there. You do not want rainfall from other neighbors' homes who may be using Roundup, other herbicides and pesticides to get into your pond. That would kill your critters. So you put a berm around your pond so that when it rains, the water goes off. Believe it or not, when we have those torrential rains, this area in our lawn has white water. So we're at the bottom of a hill. It comes quite a distance, and water's trying to get to the creek behind me. So you don't want that water coming into your pond, so berm around it. And then vary your edge treatments. I love having a log. This is something I like in nature. I like to go to lakes and ponds and sit on a log and watch what's happening. So I recreated that. Dave did the work. He sawed off the bottom part of this log, made a ledge, and it fits over some bricks. And I'll show you that in a close-up in a few minutes. I tried putting in a grassy area. It didn't work for me very well, but maybe you'd have luck. And then I tried to vary the contours of my pond by putting in a planting pocket. And the way you do that, what I've done here is I put a circle of rocks, and I've taken some of the leftover pond liner and put it in there and used clay soil. You don't use potting soil ever in a pond. It will float and it will be messy. You always want to use heavy clay soil, so that hard pan that's under your lawn or wherever, that's the perfect soil for using in a pond. See, it has a use. Anyway, you put that in there, and then you plant plants that like their roots wet. And one of the plants that I have in it in this picture is a point-raised checker bloom. Now they do make planting bags that you can buy already made, so if you want to give the stores your money, you can use a planting bag. But if you built the pond in yourself, you're going to have scraps, and you can use those. So this is the log I have now. That other log, after 18 years, it kind of degraded. And so when our large oak tree that I said I have no more, well, what happened is it fell over into the pond Christmas Eve. We think Santa and the reindeer kind of missed. So we had to completely empty the pond and rebuild it, because I had not built my first pond with real pond liner. It was a swimming pool, so I had swimming pool liner, and I put cheap black plastic over it. Well, swimming pool liner isn't nearly as thick as the liner for a pond, and I have a piece of liner in the back. It's a rubber material, and it's 45 or 48 mil.
40 mil. Yeah.
45? 45 millimeters thick. And I'll show you a critter it has withstood later on in the program. Anyway, we had to put a new log in. So we brought this log home on top of our car. People wondered about this Christmas tree we were bringing home. Didn't look quite regular. And what I've done is Dave's sawed off the bottom of it, kind of at an angle, and then we put the piece we sawed off down below it. Because I often have noticed if I go to a pond, there's a log jam. And where this log jam is where the critters are. So I did that, and then I put a long piece of narrow pond liner, made it into a V, put the clay soil in there, and planted plants. And so far they're that big, but I think they'll get larger. And this is when the weather's hot, this This is where I sit. I put my feet in the pond. I invite my girlfriends over for an iced latte, and we enjoy the warm weather. Yeah. And this is just a picture to show you of the fun I had finding some art. Some people see this as a dog, and some as a cat. To me, it's a cat. We found this at a beach and brought it in, kind of some fun art around our pond. And here's my beloved dragonfly art. So we've had a lot of fun with our pond. We collected almost all the rocks, everything ourselves. That was the fun of it. So, provide transitions for your pond. You have your beach, and then you need bog areas. So this area is a sunny bog, and this other area is a shady bog that's not as shady anymore now that the oak tree's gone. When you have a bog, what you do is you dig the soil 18 inches deep, you put pond liner in there, and you design your pond so when it's at maximum full, the water overflows into this area, keeping it damp, and then you plant marsh-loving plants there. It gives your critters a safe way to go in and out of your pond without being seen. And my favorite story I like to tell, and I hope you like snakes. If you don't, just plug your ears right now. We had a pair of aquatic garter snakes come into the pond, and they met nose to nose in the middle of the pond, and then they entwined around each other, and they swam off into the sunny bog, which was grown up with plants. This is right when it was first planted, and the bushes started shaking. And Dave was not retired yet. He was still working, and I called him and said, "Honey, you can't believe what's happening in the sunny bog." I called him back an hour later and said, "Guess what? The bushes are still shaking." It went on for at least 2 hours. I never knew snakes were quite so sensuous. That was quite a thrill for us. So this is the bog now. Remember, I'm trying to recreate my wetlands meadow. So here I've got 3 plants. There's the blue flag, actually that's the Douglas iris. And then I have the seep monkey flower and marsh buttercup growing there. And then you do have to think about overflow. When it rains, your pond's going to overflow. And what I've done is it's very simple. I put a little piece of black pipe in the lowest spot. And the water goes through there. And unfortunately, that's what did my black oak in. Because it got I thought I had it going past there and going on down, diverted below it, but I didn't know that my connection had come apart. And I lost the oak, but I thought I would really miss it. I don't. I'm just really surprised. I thought I would really miss it. So you might want to put in a waterfall. You don't have to. We didn't have a waterfall our first year. And our waterfall is 3 boulders. There's a bottom boulder here, another one touching it, and then a cup up on top. Because my yard slants the wrong way. It slants down from there. And then I have another boulder next to it to make it look right. And these came in on a forklift. And the scariest moment of my life was when Dave leaned his head under the forklift to direct placing these boulders. Oh man, that was scary. Very scary. But I love having a waterfall. The sound is soothing. I don't hear the traffic. We're only 3/10 of a mile up from Highway 116, and there's a stoplight there, and you can hear those trucks grinding down to a stop and starting up again. But now with the waterfall, I can be in my backyard and people can drive up on my gravel lane, and I don't hear them drive up. So it's really good at making the soundscape more pleasant. And moving water discourages mosquitoes. It also oxygenates your water, which makes it healthier for critters. In 2003, Audubon magazine put this picture in. I was just really proud, and I plan to show the magazine to you today, but it went on walkabout, and it didn't tell me where, so I don't have this to share with you. But I can't believe where building a wildlife pond has taken me. It's really pretty neat. Okay, so we've designed our exterior of the pond, and now it's time to think about the interior. Now, our pond originally was a 24-foot round doughboy pool, but I did not want it to still look like that, so I've obscured that fact. And so this is about 24 feet across this way, and about 20 feet this way. Now the area, the light blue area on the outside, is only a few inches deep. Think about where you see your polywogs when you go out in nature. And the critters, they're always in the shallow part of the pond. That's because that's where the water's the warmest, and they like it best. Now, if you're building a pond for koi, they tell you to put straight down 4-foot edges to keep those raccoons from damaging your koi. But if you're putting in a pond for wildlife, you don't worry about the raccoons. They belong there, so that's not a problem. And now this light green area is actually a planting shelf that's 18 inches deep. The raccoons and the herons don't like to get in water deeper than 18 inches. And that's where I'll have pots of plants planted. And then this dark green area, that is about 3 feet deep, about this deep on me. And that gives protection to any of the critters. And you need to provide yourself a way in and out, because let me tell you, sloped pond liner with a little bit of algae on it, which it naturally gets and is supposed to get, is mighty slippery. And you try walking up that and you slide right back down. So we just filled gunny sacks with soil and we put in steps going into our pond. And I know another person who built a 4-foot deep straight down pond. They said it was for wildlife. They can't go in to clean the pond. They have no way to get out. And one time they came home and they found a dead fawn in the pond. So shallow edges are what things are used to in nature. They're not used to suddenly 4 feet deep. It's not like I'm preaching, but just trying to talk into all this. So after that, it's pretty much what you're used to in your regular garden. You're going to plant in clumps. So there's pickerel reed and mare's tail. Plant something for each season. So my first thing, and the first one opened yesterday, is the blue flag iris. I always love it when it starts. Right below it, the plant you see is the blue pickerel. Okay, right there. It's not blooming yet, but when it comes on, right about the same time that the flag finishes. And then here's one individual flower, and if you look really closely, there's a little white crab spider there. This is the kind of spider that can change its color, but I guess it can't change to blue. So we changed to white, and I thought it was kind of cute. Summer flowers. That's the cardinal flower and the point raised checker bloom. And I did bring 3 snippets of that with me today, and you may be hearing more about it later. It's just a really beautiful plant, but it's rare. But it loves ponds, so it grows native in point raised. But I was given a snippet of it by Ron Clennanan from the Tilden Botanic Gardens, and I planted it right in that planting bog, that little circle of rocks. And it loved it, and it just took off, and now I am able to give it to people. So I brought some here. And this is the marsh buttercup. I thought it was marsh marigold, but I found out I was wrong. So a lot of summer blooms. And knotweed or smartweed, loved by the gray hair streak. And fall color. These are Japanese maple. They are not a native plant, but my son had done bonsai collecting, and so I had a lot of little maples, and I use them. But vine maple would be another plant that is a native that you could use for the same effect. When they turn deep red, and then the Indian rhubarb turns orange, it's just really so gorgeous. I have a hard time leaving the window. But it all dies back in the winter. Almost all of these plants will come back from their rootstock. So in the winter, it's just reflective. I loved the shape of a round rock with the straight up and down of the horsetail against it, so I recreated that here. And then the ginger that was planted on the back of the rock decided it liked coming over to the front. And then some of this California fern decided it wanted to grow there. And for me, some of the fun is finding out what decides to grow in my pond. It's not all what I planned, it's kind of what decides to be there. And then some drama. That Indian rhubarb leaves really, I think without it, the pond would not have the same effect that it does psychologically. And there's that little frog sleeping right in the middle because the moisture collects there. Yeah, that's what it looks like come summer when all the leaves are on it. It just really adds something, some pizzazz to the pond. And you can see its flower there, very much like the coltswood flower. And I like having a reflective area in the middle of my pond. And you don't have to build it all at once. You can build it slowly, let it evolve. Ah, yes, this is my pond last spring. Yeah, the black oak is gone now, but it's still as beautiful this spring. But every pond, when you first put it in, has algae. And so I'm not showing any pictures of it right now because I don't want to turn you off. It has pea green water right now. But every pond, when you first build it, will have first string algae, which mine did, and then it'll have this green, pea green water, because there aren't enough plants growing in a first-year pond to use the dissolved nutrients in the water. So you want to encourage plants to grow. So it doesn't mean there's something wrong with your pond. I've been through this a few times, so I know this to be true. If you have pea green water, don't worry, it won't be that way forever. So how do you control that algae? Well, you cover 2/3 of the pond with emergent vegetation, so there's 1/3 and 2/3. And then my middle third of the pond has underwater plants growing it, like Elodia, which I think I show a bit in this. You can kind of see it growing under there. It's called goldfish plant. And so that uses its leaves, absorb the nutrients in the pond, and they starve the algae, and your algae dies off. And then mosquitoes. So I have some of these mosquito dunks in the back. It's a bacillus, and it costs about $10 to buy one of these. And you put them into your pond. It does not hurt anything that isn't in the family Diptera. So it doesn't hurt butterflies, dragonflies, frogs, fish if you have them, horses. I mean, we're not going to drink our pond water, but it wouldn't hurt us. It's a bacillus that kills only Diptera, which is black flies, which bite us, mosquitoes, which are the worst predators in the whole world. More people have died from mosquitoes than from lions, tigers, and all the rest. Mosquitoes are really the most dangerous creature, so you don't want to encourage them. And crane flies, which unfortunately don't harm us. If that wouldn't work for you, I would encourage you to use a native fish. The problem is trying to find a place that will sell you a native fish. Sometimes the bait shops have them as bait, so a stickleback. And the last thing I would want you to try, well, here's a stickleback for you to see. The last choice, please, very last choice, is to use the mosquito fish that the mosquito abatement people give you. This fish is not native to the Bay Area. It's native to Texas. Our animals have not evolved with it, especially our frogs. It's very detrimental, and it has escaped into our waterways. It's causing a lot of problem. That Audubon magazine said that I got rid of mine and gave them to my neighbors. No, not the neighbors you were thinking of. The neighbors were the raccoons. I left the remaining fish in a bowl, and the raccoons had a nice feast that night. So I really discourage the use of these fish. Cleaning. If you have a koi pond, you probably have to clean it every year and drain it. With a wildlife pond, you don't do as much of that, and you have to be really careful about cleaning it. I suggest you do it first thing in the morning. In the morning time, the air temperature is colder than the earth, and therefore all the critters in your pond are down in the deep end of the water. In the afternoon, when the air is warmer, your critters come up to the top, and if you clean your pond then, you're more likely to scoop them out. And you always have to look at what you scoop out for frog eggs in the spring and for dragonfly nymphs. So this is the nymph of the common green darner there. And I can't tell you how many times I look into this net and I find I have critters that I have to put back. So you have to be very careful. And now the ugliest slide you're going to see this whole program. About every 3 to 5 years you drain your pond, which is what we just did this year. And once it gets down to a puddle, I use a bucket, because what I have is a puddle full of a lot of little squirming critters. And I put them in a kitty's wading pond, which you can see I circled up there, and save that water to reintroduce the critters into my pond when I refilled it. Okay, enough of that one.
Now, why do you need to clean it?
Well, you know, in nature we have these torrential rains and downpours that scour out ponds, because all ponds are trying to become meadows. And we don't have that scouring out for our ponds we build, so we have to simulate it by doing this. So normally all I do is I wait till a hot day when it's 90 degrees, put on some bicycle rider pants because I don't want any critters crawling inside my clothing. And I go out and I just thin the plants. All of our native water plants could be called invasive if you wanted to think of them that way, because they all spread by seeds and runners, and with water there's nothing to stop them. So when the growth gets exuberant, I just go in and thin it. And so having a wildlife pond is sort of a pyramid plan in reverse. You put your pond in, your plants grow, you thin them, and you give them to two people. They thin them, they give them, yeah, you can picture it. So I have plants, babies from my ponds all over. And I don't mind, I would much rather be thinning my plant than having to try to baby something. You don't have to do this, but I would recommend that you tie your pond in with the rest of your yard. So instead of using like cement pavers, we use flagstone with some red in it to match the boulders I put in. And we even did the silliest thing. We put a mini boulder in the middle of our patio. I mean, nobody would do that. It's a little mind trick that people, when they see this boulder there in the middle of my patio, just assume that the boulders of my waterfall are natural. I can't believe how many people think my pond belongs there when my land slopes the wrong way and everything. But it's just part of making it look natural. I even use dry pond materials and plants in my window arrangements inside the house to tie it in. And I use pond plants elsewhere in my decks. And this horsetail you see growing right out my window, I actually have it in a pot in my patio. And then I used curved pieces of the flagstone, and it looks like it's just growing there, and it makes people, nobody's ever questioned this fact that there's this pond in my yard. They think it just belongs there. So it's all little mind tricks I've learned. And then Mother Nature has made some of her own contributions. I think this plant is called Jack in the Pulpit, but I never planted it. I think it came in on the feet maybe of that mallard. I'm not sure. So there's actually a pair. He's guarding the hen, who is barely visible there. So build a pond, and they will come, and you will enjoy it too. So we enjoy picnicking by our pond. So I'm just going to show you a few slides now of the steps for actually doing the physical building of a pond. Ours started out as a swimming pool, so it's not the one I'm going to use as an example. Nor am I going to use my friend Harry's pond. He dug this with a shovel. And it's kind of interesting. What we've got here is it's very shallow all around the edges. He's got maybe 4 or 5 inches deep. Then he has a ring that's 18 inches deep, and the very center of his pond is 2 inches deep. But you don't notice that when you look at it. You think that that's deep all the way across. He got tired of digging. He has the most prolific dragonfly nursery I've ever seen in my life. Some days he has a dozen dragonflies emerge from his pond. So I think he's got a good thing going there. And he had lots of fun building his waterfall. And he was the first person I gave pond plants to. You may notice some of the same plants. And then Judy, she's a nursery columnist up in Sonoma County, also built a pond and put it right outside her deck, and she just loves it. But there's one problem with her pond: it's too small. And she has had problems with raccoons. So again, 15 by 20 feet. I really would encourage you to build a pond at least that large. And Dave can talk to you afterwards about a great place we found up in Cloverdale that sells pond liner way cheaper than what you're going to find locally. Some of you may know Louise Hallberg for her butterfly gardens up in Grayton, and this is where we're building her pond. She didn't put a beach in because children visit her pond on field trips all the time, but she put this big stick out and the dragonflies perch there, so she's enjoying her wildlife pond. And this person, I found them on the internet. Boy, talk about putting your pond right close to your house. She built it right up to the foundation. She just sits in her window seat, she says, and looks out and watches the dragonflies and the birds. She really enjoys it. But if you have a lot of land, you might consider doing what the Mount Shasta Hospital did. It was a mitigation plan because they actually built the hospital in what was kind of a swampy area. And they built these ponds, and of course in Mount Shasta, the Mount Shasta daisy is the native plant. So here's their native plant wildlife pond. Okay, and this is our pond up on Mount Shasta itself. It's at about 4,700 feet. And we're only up there 1 week a month. We are totally off the grid. There is no electricity available to us. We use solar and batteries. So this pond does not have a waterfall, so I built it big. This is about 30 by...
At least 30 by 25.
At least 30 by 25 feet, with the idea being it would be more stable the larger it was. It's also similar to Livermore, temperature-wise. Lots of 90 degrees and temperatures and lots of sunshine. This pond has brought me the most enjoyment. We're in the middle of a dry, arid area. This is what that area looked like before the pond. Ugh, yeah. It wasn't going to look like that forever, but the pond, yeah, go back. I mean, what an improvement. We dug this pond with a tractor, easy way. It was kind of fun. I told him, would you, well, you know, we employed him to put our soil back when our house was just finished up against the foundation. I said, would you mind just spending a few more minutes? Of course he wouldn't. He gets money for each minute, you know. I said, would you just take a scoop here? And he did. And I said, oh, another scoop, and he did. And I said, oh, another scoop, and he did. And I said, now a shallower scoop. And he says, you're not putting in a pond, you're putting in a lake. So anyway, right in this picture, he's actually putting in the bog for this pond. And then after he did that, we were gone for a couple weeks, and we came back up, and that's actually ice in the bottom of the pond. And I used a rake and just raked out all the rocks, because you don't want rocks in the bottom of your pond, because that will stab through your pond liner and not be a good thing. And then I had to make sure it was level, because you don't want all of your water falling out one side and there's your pond empty at the other side. So this pond was too large. Usually they say to use a 2x4 with a level on it. We had to use a laser level because we didn't have any 2x4s that long. We used old carpeting to go down first as an underlayment. You can also use newspapers, and if you've got a lot of money you can buy pre-made pond liner, but the carpet places are very often happy to get rid of the old carpeting from other people's homes. And what was our friend's tragedy when his rental home had sprung a leak became our pond liner. Then we spread the liner out, and you have to, there's mathematical equations that you can use to help you determine that, and I don't have them memorized, so I'm not going to mention them. We started filling the pond with water, and the very first thing I put in were my underwater plants, because you don't need to even have them in soil. You can just put them in a tray, and then rocks on top of them to hold them down, and again, those leaves then are going to take the nutrients from the water and grow that way. And I filled sandbags with soil and put them in for steps, and then I used those little swimmy things, swim noodles, and I put them in at the edge of the shallow part of the pond where it goes into the deeper part, because the problem I discovered is your beach wants to migrate down to the deep end of your pond. And so this forms a little ridge so that that doesn't happen, and it's inexpensive. And I called my brother up and I said, Bob, we're filling the pond with water. And he said, did you put your escape route in, Kathy? And I went, oh, no, I didn't. So I ran out and took this dead manzanita branch and put it in the pond. And by the time I got to the other side of the pond, here were the fox sparrows already using it. And then when the pond filled up just a little bit more, it started floating. So I waded in and I grabbed hold of this stick to put it up further. And a blue-bellied lizard climbed off of it up my arm and hit on my back. So I had to go and sit down on the deck and let him crawl off of my back. So within hours, that was already in use. So there's the pond at the end of the first day. We were filling it using our well, and we had to wait for the well to fill back up again, pump some more water out. We had solar panels and a solar pump working on it. And I started trimming away the excess liner. This is where you'll end up with odd pieces here and there that you can use then to make planting pockets and such things. That's what it looked like at the end of the second day. And I had to determine where it was going to overflow for this pond. I have it, since the property, the slat goes away from the house, I was able just to put down some pond liner there, and then I've covered it with rocks and put sedges and things in it. It's really beautiful now. There I am digging the bog area where I've dug it 18 inches deep and used half peat moss and half my native soil. That's what it looked like when I was putting it in, and that's what it looked like 2 years later. It's been very successful, and my birds love that area for entering the pond. There's Dave adding more soil. So in this area, I'm not worried about the neighbors using any herbicides or anything. I'm just worried about the amount of debris that's going to come down in a torrential rain, and I don't want all that debris ending up in my pond. It was dirty work. This is the side of a volcano, that volcanic ash. Ooh, yes. So we're working now on the edging. We collected all our own rock. And we collected logs. This is up in the National Forest, and they have these cull piles where you're free to take from. So we started placing them around the edge of the pond. And then it was time to work on our beach. And you may not believe this, but we collected our own beach. So we just went up to a nearby creek that overflows and collected some beach. Spread it out. And that's what it looked like at the end of the third day. And then we had to leave because we needed to come home, and winter was upon us. And the next time we came up, we discovered we couldn't do any more work that season. It totally froze over. So I waited until the end of the winter, and then I got my courage up, and I did walk out on it. It actually froze hard enough that I could go out on it. And yet I have frogs in this pond, and salamanders in this pond, and dragonfly nymph. And they're able to survive these situations. It's just amazing to me. So within the first few days, I had 4 mammals, 11 kinds of birds, 6 kinds of insects, the blue-bellied lizard, already recorded in my pond. And since then, I've added many more species, some of which I'm going to show you in just a minute. So this is the pond, how it looks now. And that's a doe and her cute little fawn there, getting a drink. You can see I still have that overflow, the driftwood piece there. And I've changed that one log that looked like it was at a parking lot and put it in and out of the pond. Things keep changing. Some of the birds and insects that visit the pond, a 12-spotted skimmer is a regular, tons and tons of tree frogs. This is a lazuli bunting. They look like little pieces of sky have fallen. White-headed woodpeckers come to our pond. Evening grosbeaks, crossbills, western tanager. I mean, we have people come to the Bay Area just to sit on our deck so they can watch the birds. Green-tailed towhee, Audubon's warbler, Cassin's finch, hermit warbler, lots and lots of water striders. The Shasta species of alligator lizard has a gray head. Came in, I think he's feeding on some of the little critters that are attracted to the edge of the pond. Beautiful bucks come in. I worry about the hunters finding them, although it's illegal to hunt here in our housing association. Black-tailed deer, and the fawns are just so cute. But this is the surprise. Yep, we've had 2 different bears come in and get drinks. This guy, this was 3 years ago, we called him Mickey because he has a mantle, a pale mantle. He came back again this year, and I'm going to show you something. I've never showed it before, so I hope I can do this. He came in and went swimming in the pond while we were there this summer, last July, so I think I can do this. Whoops. Okay, if I click here, if I say okay, if I make it, where's my, okay. I don't know if you can hear the music. We had classical music playing. I swear he's doing ballet. He was having a good time. That's when we took a still picture, didn't know that would happen. I think he's eating the duckweed. I think that's when he sees us standing in the window filming him and he decides he's going to leave and I'm going, don't scare him. Think about the claws on that guy. I did not want him ripping my pond liner. He says, see, I'm being a good bear, I'm leaving. Yeah, so he was about this tall. Yeah. Anyway, that was quite the thrill for us to have this bear. And if you want to see that again, YouTube, splish splash, a bear in my pond. I never expected that. And I won't have a bear in this pond. This is my Sebastopol pond. So we built that in 1996. 18 years now I've had this pond, and I just love it. I'm not at all tired of it. So here it is as a swimming pool. We drained it, took down the sides. Blue liner looked funky, so we put cheap black plastic over it, which floated. So we had to add rocks to hold it down. That's where I made a mistake. I was trying to keep costs down. I should have used real pond liner. The swimming pool liner did not last all that long, especially with that black oak coming in. So there's the boulders coming in. So we've hoped we've inspired you to maybe build a pond for wildlife. This is a picture from my coloring book about dragonflies, which is for sale in the back of the room, and also on a CD if you're a teacher, so you can make 30 copies of one page. And my website, Big's Nest Wildlife Pond. Every year I try to put pictures up. I'm way behind. I've only got pictures up through June of last year. You can see the calamity. You can see the tree in my pond. And then I do have my books, my dragonfly guides, Build a Pond for Wildlife on a CD, and also a handout where you could buy it as an e-book. And I also have an e-dragonfly guide, so I encourage you to try some of those. And I'll answer a few questions now if any of you have any. Yes?
Our water is fluoridated, and I'm wondering what you suggest.
Chlorinated water, what do you do?
Fluoridated, yeah.
Yeah. If it was a liquid kind of chlorine, you just dissipate it into another container and then add it 3 days later to your pond. But if you have the kind that's the
Chloramine.
yeah, you have to buy a special product and use that to get the chlorine out of your water, and you would probably get that at either a pond shop or a fish shop. I have well water in both my properties, so I'm not experienced. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Yes?
You said you need to go and trim back your plants.
Yes.
Can you use those trimmings in your compost pile?
Yes, you can. In fact, the first time I ever did it, I learned something from that. My first time I ever pruned them, I took them back to my compost pile and I just piled them up. I went back to the compost pile about an hour later. They had been full of damselfly nymph who weren't quite ready to emerge, but they were either going to die or emerge now, so they were all valiantly trying to emerge. So when I do my thinning, what I do is I put a piece of wire mesh over the pond, and I put the plants overnight on that wire mesh so any little critters can fall back in. You didn't have to do that, but I felt like a murderer. That wasn't good. Yes?
Where do you sit on liners versus clay and bentonite?
I've never done a clay and bentonite pond, but I have visited some, and if you're doing a large pond, that's the way to go because it's more cost efficient. So if you want to do a pond larger than my mountain pond, you might consider it's clay and bentonite, and you hire that out. You don't do that yourself, I don't believe. They also, of course, you see in Walmart these pre-made, pre-formed ponds. There are none that are built for wildlife, though. They all have the steeper edges. And I think I would encourage you to use the pond liner, and I do have a piece in the back that you can see. Any other questions before I close? Yes?
I have dogs. What happens if they drink the water? Are they going to get sick?
No, they're going to love that water, though. And you won't have any problems with raccoons if you leave your dogs out at night.
That is listed for plus.
Yeah, if you leave your dogs out at night, you will not have any raccoon problem. Did you have a question?
Just a quick one. Aside from the chicks, are there any other factors in selecting the pond liner?
There are different kinds of pond liners. Some people have tried to save expense and use roofing material, but roofing material often has an algicide built into it, which then isn't good for your pond water. And there's another kind of pond liner, but I don't think any place sells it anymore, Dave, the plastic kind of pond liner.
No.
I don't think you can buy it anymore. So
No.
pretty much the thickness is the thing that makes the difference. Was there one other question I saw? No? Okay, well, thank you very much. One more question.
You're going to tell us where to get the pond liner for bleaching.
Where to get the pond liner?
No.
New Horizon, is
No.
that the name? In the town of Cloverdale, we just got to have a little if you have a big car, that's fine. We just took a little trailer up and bought our pond liner through them. It's much less expensive than any place else. Thank you. It's wonderful talking to you about ponds. And if you want to know more about dragonflies, have me back next year.